talking here during the break that do come out of live things that you may have to that you don't have in studio stuff. One is the immediate satisfaction. If you're the kind of person who can't wait for the finished product, might as well finish the product today and then try another one tomorrow. So in doing live work, what you're doing is a day-to-day thing. You don't get hung up on fine. You can get up on fine tuning, but the product you do today, being able to reproduce that or do it tomorrow, each day is a challenge and a different thing. So you run into different things. I'm not trying to sell you on working 18 hours a day, lugging equipment, and literally killing yourself to do sound reinforcement. But if you're into, if you get tired, you get in the studio and God, I want to be involved with sound, but I can't stand waiting for this guy to do another cut, another tape. You want to become a sound engineer and you just do a sound check and say, hey, that's enough, let's go. Or there's a lot of real good sound companies, not sound companies, but bands on the road who have real good engineers. And they come in and say, well, what time sound check? This is whenever we're ready. We don't invite the band to the sound check because they just mess it up. And it's true. They do. And usually the crews that are like that, they've got it down. The band walks on stage, everything's perfect, and they're happy. Either that, or if they can't, if it's an impossible situation, the band doesn't know about it to the last minute, and that way they don't get bummed out. That was the way it was explained to me. The other aspect of things, as well as equalization, that is very important in the live thing is being able to troubleshoot. Knowing what goes wrong and where and how the whole system works. I think you all have been working somewhat with block diagrams and signal flow. I started to sketch some stuff out here. I'll go through it a bit with what signal flow is in a live sound system. It's different than what you're doing in the studio. At least I think so. But in a live sound system, and whatever, you've got actually, as I was talking earlier, two separate systems where you have a main board, and from the main board, you have a processing loop or several processing loops, which we call effects, obviously. It comes out of the board, but the main signal usually ends up going to an electronic rack, which it probably would first go to an equalizer. From an equalizer, I'll set up this. This is in a sample system. There's many different ways of doing it. But from an equalizer to a crossover to a compressor on the output stages of the crossover. In your effects rack, you may also have individual compressors for submasters, for individual channels, that sort of thing. The compressor on the output of the crossover in larger professional systems is used just so when the visiting engineer walks up to the board and he says, master, and he pushes it all the way up, you don't end up blowing your speakers. You end up you limit the amount of signal going into the system. You're adding protection. As you run your sound system closer and closer to its limit, the more you need that sort of protection to prevent blowing up. Unless you have a lot of money and like to pay for diaphragms and drivers and that sort of thing, and carrying it around. So from the crossover output of the compressor, you would end up going to an amp rack. Okay, of which the signals, which we'll digress just a second here. This is a four-way system. We were looking at in the slides three-way, four-way systems, and two-way. Does everyone understand the? All right. How many people know what biamping is? I should have said how many people don't know what biamping is. Okay. Basically, I'll start from the ground floor and the fact that biamping, you need. I'm sure you all know that in your speaker system you have some sort of a crossover from the lows, the mids, and the highs to separate the frequencies out, because the different speakers can only handle certain frequencies, reproduce certain frequencies well. Okay, biamping a system, you electronically divide the signal before the amplifier. This way, the major reason for doing this is efficiency. You can match the speaker up to the driver and the frequency, therefore you can use each component to its maximum. When you put a passive crossover in, it takes power to drive the crossover. So as it may be, whatever. Electronically dividing the signal, you can, in a biamp system, you're cutting the signal two ways. You're going high frequency and low frequency. Typically, biamp system, your low frequency cabinets would cross over somewhere from 800 hertz on down, or 1,000, somewhere in that range, and the horn would go from 1,000 hertz on up. This is what you see in most bar sound systems and things like that, where you've got bass cabinets, horns. A three-way system is divided three ways, either in smaller club systems, usually bass cabinets, mid-highs, and tweeters to give you an extended frequency response on the sound system. If you get into larger systems, you get into Coliseum systems, if it's a three-way system, they'll go low cabinets, mids being a low mid, mainly to project vocals, and then go to the mid-highs, which would run out into the highs. The systems overlap. Different components. By purchasing the right components, you can do any kind of system well. Four-way is pretty much the standard large and medium large sound system that's touring, which is up here. There are now, the BG system was a five-way system. Player Brothers has a five-way system in which they use W-bin strictly as a thumper. Was the term, which they go crosses over from 100 hertz on down. And in a flown system, such as the S system, or now the S is the one I'm familiar with. The woofers were under the stage, and the rest of the speaker cluster was all flown overhead. Bass is basically omnidirectional, and they coupled the bass cabinets with the floor just to shake the whole building. Nice effect. So that's the basics of biamping, triamping, quadamping, and whatever. Selecting cabinets to match up with the crossovers or to match up with the type of situation you're in, the efficiency then translates out into cleaner sound. Such as the systems we had here with the 4050s. The 4050s are real nice from like 300 hertz on down. You put it up above there, they get muddy. The information coming out of the cabinet is not as clean. So from that point, we cross them over at least 250 or even lower, depending on the cabinet we use with it, going into a cabinet that is best suited for putting out mids. And there on up. In doing this, and we went over the slides, you get into the number game. If you're going to go into anything, if you're a recording engineer, you need a set of numbers. If somebody says go get a U87 and you walk over to the drinking fountain and get them a cup of water, you're going to say, hey, you don't know what you're doing. It's the same thing with sound reinforcement. A lot of things translate over. A typical phone call between an engineer and myself, when we're talking about concert equipment, he'll say, well, what kind of mics do you have? Okay, we got PL95s, we got a couple KM84s, we got AKG 451s, we got AKG D12, we got Shure 57s, we got, you run down a list and all you're doing is numbers. He says, well, what kind of speakers? Well, we got 4050s, we got MB60s and BRH90s with DH1012s, and we got SD350As, and we got Gauss 1502s, and, run down that. He and I will understand each other perfectly if he's together. If he's not, he's off in left field. Although I haven't talked to an engineer with a touring group who doesn't know those numbers by heart. He'll know, what kind of board. Okay, it's this, what kind, and well, and he'll know if it's a PM1000, whether it's a Model 10 or whether it's a custom audio. He'll know what the board is. If it's a Midas, he'll say, yeah, okay, and what kind of effects, and you go down. So you need to have a feeling for what's in the field. If you walk on site and you look at the equipment and you don't know what the equipment is, but you say, hey, I want to go to work, I want to do this, you're already too late, because if you should. Before you're going to start in the business. I know several groups where the lighting men know what the equipment is just because from hanging around. If they wanted to hold a conversation, they had to, they had to know a little bit about it. It's important. People are impressed by knowledge, especially if your women are into doing sound reinforcement. You have 3 strikes against you. No women can do sound reinforcement. That's a proven fact. If you believe that, you're more of a fool than I am. I've had several women working for me in the past, and they've all done an excellent job. But the thing is that if you don't present yourself well, male or female, it's very hard to overcome the initial, the initial conversation of getting to know people. Sound companies and everything else are, I don't know if it's typical, but everyone's usually very laid back and very friendly. No one, we're not in the business to be arrogant. The more people can trade off, the more they can know. So the number game becomes important. How do you play the number game? Basically, you go to your local sound reinforcement dealers, get all the literature, get to know a little bit about it. You wouldn't go in the studio and if somebody handed you a microphone and said, "Here, use it." If you were doing a session and you were charging, $150 or $200 an hour, they expect you to know what that microphone is. The same way if you're doing a show. You have to know your equipment. Knowing it, that way you also can troubleshoot it. If you know your block diagram to your speakers, if something goes out, you've got a total of 10 seconds to figure out what the problem is if you're in the middle of the show. If you've got 10 seconds, if the sound system goes down and there's 10,000 people in the audience and they get bummed and they leave, promoter's going to come down on you to say, "Hey, you owe me $40,000 plus," and obviously you're not going to make it for the gig. So being able to troubleshoot the system, doing checks for making your system redundant, meaning that you've got backup equipment and everything, becomes critical. It's as critical as speaker placement or microphone placement. You have to know how to back yourself up. If something goes down, you've got to be there, and you got to be able to know the number game so you can call up somebody in the locale that you're in and say, "Hey, something went down." Ideally, you have a spare part with you. Ideally, you never need a spare part. But you're never gonna have a flat tire in your car either. The second plus point is to always have a spare with you. If you can't carry a spare, then you carry a list of dealers who can get it to you. Our touring systems that are out, we maintain 24-hour service with them. If something goes down within 24 hours, they have a new piece of gear anywhere in the country. But if we, as a company that's service-oriented and keeping our systems up, if they weren't up the next day, we wouldn't be touring. Those systems would be, the service would go somewhere else, and the system would go someplace else. You have to have, you have to be on top of it all the time. So spare parts becomes important, when you're wiring and all that. Next point on the agenda here is how to get a job, where to start, what are the qualifications, and whatever. First of all, there is no set way of getting a job in sound reinforcement. I don't claim to have any secret way, and no, we don't have any openings at the moment. Sorry, but in the meantime, Sound Advocate is a company. We have 10 people there, of which some people have been there for quite a while. But we are going through people constantly, so we're always interested in people. Whatever. As we put more systems on the road, we need more people. The best place to start as far as looking for a job is start at the beginning, which is, for some people it's a bummer, but think about finding somebody you can work with, be it a sound company, be it a band, and start with them and get to know who they are. In developing a working relationship on any job, I wouldn't label it that. It's a matter of establishing a working relationship and seeing if you can get along. I have one engineer who I only see once a week, sometimes twice, but he's out on a road with a small system for us, and his job is just is maintaining things. If he has a problem, he calls me up and we can get it fixed. But otherwise, I don't really see him. I have to know him. I have to trust him, and I know that he's going to represent the company properly. Now, if he does a bad sound job, it's not one person. It's a whole company doing a bad sound job. So it's very much developing a family relationship and a trusting relationship in the people that you're working with. And the people who are working right now into being engineers are working in other capacities in the company, be it working in installations, getting the troubleshooting down, or in the cabinet department, getting the knowledge of how the equipment is put together, what it takes to build it, what it takes to road it. That way by working up through the company, you end up knowing more than just, hey, I know how to turn knobs. That's important, but on the road, there's a lot of other angles of the thing. As I was saying, start with somebody who's on the same level as you are. Or actually, the best situation is start with somebody who is a little bit better, if you can get in on that level. Working with them as a sound engineer. Any major sound company, the engineer who is running the whole system, be it a system for 50,000 people or 100,000 people, started at a point where he took a basic system, be it a biamp system or a system that had, was just, he had 2 PV cabinets and a PV board. He went out and set it up and learned how to run that. And all you do from there is get larger and more complicated. So all the problems you run into with a major concert tour, you're going to run into working with somebody else. So it's best to get into a situation where you can experience a good deal of the problems before they actually happen to you, and you got 4,000 or 5,000 people sitting around you going, I don't hear anything. Very uncomfortable feeling if that happens. It's been a long time, and I don't want to ever have to deal with that. But somebody can trip over an extension cord. But if the first thing you don't look for is the extension cord, man, you could tear amp racks apart for hours, and then find, oh wow. It happened. We've got some performance club installations. We have one in Cincinnati that we've gotten a phone call. The system's been in for, I think, 3 years now. In the 3 years, the system has gone down once because somebody poured a Coke in the board. But they have called us probably a half a dozen times in the last 2 years for us to go down and do something to the sound system. It's not working right. The last time we went down, we turned the microphone around so it wasn't facing the speaker and it didn't feed back anymore. Well, the time before we went down, we turned the volume control up on it. Little things like that, because the people, it's in a hotel, and the people down there don't understand troubleshooting. With the system, they got a troubleshooting guide. They lost the book. We gave them another troubleshooting guide. They lost the book. At that point, they can pay $100 a call, and we'll go down and do it for them. But, but that's the kind of situation you run into. A lot of the stuff usually is very simple. And the experienced troubleshooter usually was good at working puzzles, because it's basically all it is. It's this puzzle. And you got to keep your head about you. Qualifications to start a job. Hey, the most work you can get, the better off you are. The better your resume looks. If you work for Joe Blow and the Schmoes out doing sound, hey, that's worthwhile. You got to let people know what kind of experience you've had. And this workshop is a great experience. In the fact that you've got a lot of hands-on with equipment. You can walk out of here and you can talk boards, you can talk EQ to people. You're not going to feel like a stranger when you walk up to a $50,000 mixing console and you look at it and parametric. I remember that's something they make a 10 out of. It's happened. I've had people come up. Best example would be Earl Scruggs. Earl Scruggs never believed in a sound engineer. So his bus driver, it's not his bus driver. I don't know Harley's his name anyway. Harley's about 54 years old, maybe only 50, but he's got a lot of gray hair. Harley has the same philosophy with all boards. We analyzed the system to flat, did a real nice small hall show with them, several of them actually, but the first time I worked with them, we walked in the small hall, everything was perfect for them. They walked in. Harley comes out to the board, and he looks at the board, and he says, well, the vocals always like a little bit of bass. And so he just takes 200 on the board and turns bass all the way up. Didn't even have the band on stage yet. I mean, he didn't even know what it was going to sound like, and vocals always got to have a lot of bass on them. As it turned out, the vocals were just terrifically muddy. The rest of the band, he never touched a thing on the board. We'd make adjustments for him, and he just pushed the faders, but he wanted the vocals like that. Sounded terrible, but he was happy. Said it was the best system he'd worked on since the Grateful Dead. Well, it was one of those things that you kind of go, but why? I don't know what them knobs mean. I just turn them. Terrible. But qualification. This man's he's been on the road for 27 years. He has some other good stories to tell too, but being able to have the experience working with somebody, even if it's on the road crew, and asking questions, you end up going around. You find a whole lot. You find the people that are easy to work with for you, or the bands that's easy to work with. You develop a relationship. From there, you'll go on. There are engineers in Columbus who make decent salaries working with bands, who wouldn't leave for 3 times the salary, just because hey, they'd rather work with the people. You have to be comfortable with it. Not to bring it into the family, my brother just has turned down 2 tours that as an engineer that he didn't want to do because he just didn't think he'd be comfortable with it. And one was $850 a week pay, and the other one was, I think, was only about $750 a week. It's not bad pay, you can live on that. He says, nah, I'm not interested. I don't think I'd be happy with that. But he's to a point, and he being independent, that people say, hey, do you want to do this tour? So you've got that sort of situation that you can deal with. So you have to pick and choose. It's that way throughout the business. What is the pay scale? Basically anything you make it. Most people right now who are basic sound engineers with sound companies working on a regular basis are making anywhere from $150 to $300 a week plus a per diem on the road. Now, a road engineer with a real good group or somebody who's out with their own system, if you're the head engineer, you're making probably at least $500 a week. From there on up. One of the higher paid people I know, I think, was making $1,750 a week plus expenses. He can live on that, He also got a house as a bonus. He works the duties. So, there are also, there's a wide spectrum, and it's open to each one of you to prove yourself and go as far as you can with it. A lot has to do with not the politics, but, well, it is politics. I don't know how to say it. You got to know somebody, but work from there. As far as getting qualified, some of the best the reference material to use, the Burroughs book I mentioned before, Modern Recording gives you a rundown usually every month of somebody's sound system and how it works. Get to know what they're using. Same way with the numbers game on cabinets. We were in the break. We were talking about different companies that make cabinets. JBL has a whole list of cabinets you should know. Forsyth's, Eastern Acoustic Works. The Clare Brothers cabinet, the S4. S4 it's real, they get really into heavy technical numbers. The S4 is a square cabinet that's 4 feet on each side. Therefore, S4, square 4. It also weighs 500 pounds, has 2 18s, 4 10s, and 2 horns and 2 tweaks in it. But you run into these numbers and people and all that. And if you know what different people are using, you can go out and, strike up a conversation with somebody and say, hey, you guys need any help? And I go, and it's either one of 2 answers. It's either yay or nay. Makes it, but, if nothing else, you learn a little bit more in doing it. So, leave it on that. There's another magazine that you all could subscribe to. It's a freebie called Sound Arts. You have to make up your own company, guys. I'm not advocating, but it's part of the retailing business type thing. But it's by the company who do modern recording. It's for the people who are in the business, and it gives detailed explanations. A lot of it has to do with selling and retailing, but they also have a very comprehensive sound reinforcement and stage applications section in there. The Don Dave, yeah.
Where can you get a hold of that?
Probably go in most of the sound companies, stores that sell sound reinforcement stuff have it. Just ask them for one of the cards in the back of the magazine. You just write in and say and apply to it. and then I just send it to you. AES journals, Audio Engineering Society, has a bunch of real good reprinted books on sound reinforcement. You think we know a lot now? Go back and read some of those, and you find out that most of the stuff that we know today was all generated in about 1925. The only thing we do now that they weren't doing in 1925 is we do it better. We have better materials, better use of materials as far as diaphragms and whatever. The cabinets that on the Frank Zappa system and the Doobie Brothers system, that design was designed in 1932, I believe. And I haven't heard a cabinet yet that sounds better than it. Be it as it may. It may be that all those cabinets are sitting there and have mellowed out with age like a fine violin. I doubt it. Considering they're made of plywood. But, the design was there. They were doing crowds of 100,000 people at presidential inaugurations and things like that, and they were covering it. And if you look at the AES reprints, the only thing we've done has been able to improve on a lot of the stuff that's going around. Things are just really breaking in sound reinforcement as far as that goes. It's really interesting. It's also a little disappointing, but it'd be something to look at in that area. Sound System Engineering by Don Davis. I mentioned it earlier. Was that over here? It was. Somebody must have. Okay. There it is over here. Here's one of the AES terms. We have it right here. Okay, Sound System Engineering. You can get through that book. You've got, a real good handle on what it takes to do sound reinforcement. And if you walk into a situation, you'll know you can handle it. If you go into a convention center and they have a distributed system, is it worthwhile using it or not? Depending on the acts, it might work out real well as a fill for a main system. The Ohio Center here in Columbus just put in a distributed system that has only 24, is that it? 24 or 44 different delay points on the system. And it's perfect. Anywhere in the hall. I haven't heard it yet. They haven't turned it on. But the design plan, we looked at it, and as far as the design plan goes, it's right up to Don Davis's specs. He is probably the father, he's, if Doc Boner is the grandfather of sound reinforcement, then Don Davis is the father. Doc Boner discovered came up with a thing called an equalizer. Don Davis improved it for Altec. He came out with the first tunable equalizer. The first equalizers were plug-in transformers and capacitor resistive networks that Altec put in when they were doing putting in arena systems 20 years ago. So you think about it, most of the things that we've been doing in sound have only happened in the last 10 years. So you're right at the beginning of it, rather than walking into an industry that's been established for a long time. Do you have a question? Oh, sorry. So there's a lot of things like that. Equalization changes, and have been that. Don Davis's book is great if you want to get into the whole thing. From reading the specifications in the back of the book, it's a good book to have as a reference book. New things that are coming up that you might see in the next couple of years, or something like time delay spectrometry, called TDS, which if we can figure out a way to put it in, you'll find it in, studios now. There are quite a few studios that are coming up with things that are properly, everything is aligned properly in real time, measuring all the frequencies reproduced and making sure they're all reproduced at the console at the same time. If we can figure out how to do that in a concert hall, concert sound will go up marketably. Anyway, they'll make a big improvement. You'll find that people are working more on phase-aligned cabinets, and even in large systems, and making sure that everything works in the same plane. So concert sound will get better, and with you all's help and working on it, it'll probably, in the next few years, you'll see quite a big improvement, I hope, as well as new toys, as more of the digital people slide into the live stuff. Instead of carrying around a 350-pound, 7-foot long or 6 7-foot long console I can carry around in a suitcase and do all the same thing. Okay, any questions? All right. Gee, guys, that's all I have. Any questions? I'll be around a while. Anything that you want to talk about, whatever, I'm open. Thank you.